A huge thank you to Joe for that very kind introduction to our next panel. And yes, global trade, ladies and gentlemen, is at a crossroads. And globalization is being redefined, as we know. So it's time now to talk about reinventing supply chains for a disruptive world. And as you can see, we have a stellar lineup of guests here to tackle this subject. We have Sadhika Kumar, who's the co-founder and COO of Lynkit. A very warm welcome. We have Chodankar, who is the chairman of RRP Semiconductor. Great to have you here. Yeah. And Akash Gupta, the co-founder and CEO of GreyOrange. So thank you so much for joining us. Sorry, I'm a little bit out of breath. I just ran backstage to be here. Right, I wanted to start off with Akash. Given the recent tariffs, let's start off with the tariffs. From the Trump administration, what do you think India needs to do now in order to pretty much leverage its position and to make sure to capitalize on various emerging opportunities, such as the China Plus One strategy as well? What are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, so I think there are two aspects of it. One is how do India builds its own technology to kind of power its own manufacturing. So that's one very important aspect of it. Instead of importing technology or likes of that for manufacturing, which needs to grow and I'm sure will grow. The second aspect is also given the diversification of manufacturing that we are looking at over next few years, it's also opportunity for India to build the right technology and export it, right, to the likes of even US or Southeast Asian countries and different European countries, which are going to take manufacturing as an important part of their mission in next few years.
Definitely. Is there anything in particular you're worried about right now? Where we're in this sort of like unknown phase with these tariffs that have been announced. Is there anything you're concerned about most?
Yeah, I think we'll still have to see how all of this settles down. In fact, we as a company, we ship a lot of robotic technologies to US and Europe. Right. We do have robots in ship at this point of time, which we don't know when they land, what tariff are they going to expose to. So yeah, I think there is a lot of such concerns that are there today. I think we'll pretty much have to see how things evolve, how things settle down. But overall, I see this as a pretty good opportunity as the manufacturing diversifies, a pretty good opportunity for deep technology companies in India.
Very well said. Raj, I'd just like to throw it over to you now. Now, if you think about it, when we take a look at supply chains, it was in fact, let's take it all the way back to 2020, the pandemic. So it was actually during the pandemic where a lot of these vulnerabilities within supply chains were actually pretty much exposed. So what do you think, is there a systematic weakness, do you think, that still prevails from that time, that we still haven't got right?
Good evening. Yeah, I think the issue, with all due respect, that probably I think the entire globe could not address is, most of these established captive vendors who would actually contribute significantly to the making of a complete system. I think those were the ones who suffered and could not be retrieved. And we lost a lot of these vendors, which actually now comes to light when we try to bring in some very advanced technologies like semiconductors or defense manufacturing, and then it's difficult. I mean, it's not anyone to blame at, but the situation was so bad that most of these vendors, sometimes they take years to actually establish, and they just had to walk away because of this pandemic. And that is one weakness which I think, with all due respect, by default could not be addressed. And recovery of this is very difficult.
I mean, it was very much a learning curve, wasn't it? And it made us get things right at the same time. I mean, the rate of technology now, because of that, has been actually quite phenomenal. So, I mean, we'll get to that in just a couple of moments in your next question. But I'd like to head over to Sadhika now, the co-founder and COO of Lynkit. Now, speaking of weaknesses, although India's logistics sector is very much booming, of course, one thing that we really need to think about when it comes to supply chains and the ultimate sort of where is the weakest link in that chain, and it's always the last mile. And this isn't actually just a problem here, it's like a global problem all over the world. So why do you think this last mile issue still hasn't been resolved? I mean, people have been talking about this for a very long time now. Why isn't it done yet?
So there are demand and supply side challenges. On the demand side, we look at order volumes just generally overall being lower, and that makes it difficult to come up with, let's say, return on investment into technologies that can help you with, the last mile delivery problem. And that's not something just for tier 2, tier 3 cities in India, but if we looked at less densely populated countries, even in Europe, like Norway, for example, there are certain Amazon Prime services that they don't have available because of that same demand side issue. But we see that there is a lot of growth coming up. In fact, I saw some of Zomato's statistics that the city of Anand in Gujarat and Patiala had the highest per capita orders, much higher than any metro city in India. So the demand side problem, I think, will eventually, we'll see over the next couple of years as something that will probably alleviate itself. On the supply side, there are 3 problems. So there's cost, there's data, and there's like a tech resource problem. So the holy trifecta. So from a last mile delivery perspective, you rely a lot on addresses, having good addresses in mapping technology such as Google Maps. And you can't find good residential addresses. You can't find, to some extent, Delhi, Mumbai, the metro cities have great data. But when you start going down the tiers, it becomes more challenging to find those pin codes. So we did, with a logistics tech firm, we did work with Bharat Petroleum, and they operate a lot in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So in a city like Lucknow, we had to put in different technology tools in place to be able to actually map correct residential addresses so that the last mile optimization algorithms and the routing actually works. The second issue becomes cost. So, for real-time traffic, you rely on Google Map APIs. Those are really expensive. It really increases the cost of providing that last-mile delivery optimization. And then that becomes sort of a challenge as well, especially when you're looking at low margins, which e-commerce is. And then lastly, it is a implementation resource issue. You're working with so many other vendors who are providing that last mile delivery service to you, imposing that they follow the routes that are there, use the apps, provide good data input. All of that is a challenge. But, with services like Zomato, Lynkit, we see a lot of that change sort of happening, whether they're bringing a lot of riders, customers, delivery people, all are getting more comfortable with the use of technology.
And it's such an interesting point that, it still hasn't been mastered yet.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that develops as well. Akash, back over to you. Speaking of disruption and delays, what is the key to avoiding this? Is it a matter of partnerships? Is it diversification? Is it upgrading infrastructure? What is the key to all of this, do you think?
Yeah, I think 2 things. Firstly, partnerships are definitely going to help. At the end of the day, there is a lot of key technology, the key infrastructure that needs to be built. And I think that would happen through the right partnerships. And another thing I think which is going to be key a little bit more in midterm, not in short term, is key investment in education at the grassroots levels. I think we have leapfrogged, for example, in compute, right? We went from PCs to being the largest consumer of mobile phones and likes of that. And I think there is a leapfrogging to be done in skill and education as well, right? We might just go from kind of having basic computer skills to pretty much AI skills or advanced manufacturing skills and likes of that. So I think there's a leapfrog needed in skill and education as well. along with those right partnerships to build the right infrastructure and talent.
No, very well. So yeah, as you mentioned, education, talent, upskilling, reskilling, always very important. Raj, back over to you. We spoke earlier a little bit about the pandemic, but it was the global chip shortages very much also exposed India's reliance on imports at one time. And the government, of course, is very much pushing for local semiconductor manufacturing. How long is this going to take? When is it going to become a reality? What are your thoughts on that?
I think, to be very honest, India is really moving very fast. I think really thanks to our Prime Minister, who actually got in a lot of subsidies at the state level and the central level. And if you see, I mean, a company like us, we are mainly to defense manufacturing, but today we have a OSAT facility established. We make QFN packages for Zurich customers. Deca Technologies USA has come into India. They've tied up with us with the TTLA. So next year, beginning of the year, we'll be having parts for Qualcomm and Apple being made here in India. Generally, I think India is moving very fast. There are companies who have been awarded subsidies who are moving at a very rapid pace. There are some companies who have also come into the arena like HCL, Hiranandani, and many others who have come in. In the state, we are the only ones now, and I think Adani is also planning to be one of our captive semiconductor industry manufacturing. But to be very honest, I think 2 years down the line, we would see import substitutes in India. As far as we are concerned, all analog devices chips will be made available in India within the next 2 years or earlier. And Tata is moving at a very active pace. Micron is moving at a very active pace. So is Keynes and CJ Power. So I feel, ma'am, that we are moving very fast, and I think in semiconductor industry probably we will be almost leading in terms of making components available, chips available for local market and global market. And the fact remains is that most of the technology global players from US, Taiwan are very happy to interact with India and bring that technology to India. The biggest hindrance of setting up the infrastructure was taken over by the government by offering state and central subsidies. So the idea is to have an infrastructure debt free and just invest in the working capital is a perfect win-win situation for India. And I think we will be very happily placed in the coming 2 years in terms of semiconductor industry.
Well, we can't talk about supply chains without talking about blockchain, of course. So, Sadhika, blockchain in logistics, of course, has very much been hyped up for many years now, and people are very, very excited about this. And at pretty much every conference we go to, there's always a chat about blockchain. However, mainstream adoption in this area still remains slow. Is it really a game changer? And when is this going to be mainstream, do you think?
So blockchain is interesting because, of course, a couple of years ago, blockchain was the buzzword. So it's before people started talking about AI and Gen AI was when people were talking about blockchain. And I think it was like a buzzword that people liked to use, but they didn't quite know what it meant. So it sort of overestimated its impact in global supply chains. So blockchain was to create sort of like an Excel or a ledger that could not be changed. So it had its maximum benefit when multiple companies kind of came together and said, we're going to have a common database. Now that never really happened. I mean, we had Maersk and TradeLens being one of the most successful blockchain initiatives, which again then other, large shipping lines like a CMA, CGM said, hey, I'm not onboarding this, maybe I'll create my own, and then TradeLens kind of disintegrated. We launched a blockchain-based transport management system as well. We were also on the Hyperledger global showcase and so on. We had companies that were really interested, but again, I think the theme that we've discussed today is a lot of garbage in, garbage out. So even if you have blockchain, what needs to be really sort of pushed and enforced across companies is what kind of data is going in and what kind of validation do we have and the veracity of the information that's going in and then being stored in those ledgers. So I think the cost was too high. I think the benefit was a little overhyped. And I think we're kind of moving, particularly I think post-pandemic, into being more self-reliant and more independent than collaborative in certain areas. So yeah, I think that's sort of put the pedal, or taken the foot off the pedal of blockchain for mine.
Sadly, our time is up, but I wanted a quick fire question with you right at the end. If you had to predict the single biggest supply chain disruption over the next 5 years, what would it be? We've got technology, policy, or geopolitics. Raj, what are your thoughts?
Policy.
Policy?
Technology.
You think technology?
All of the above.
There you go. Brilliant. And if you want to find out any more, you can always speak to any of our panelists as they come on off stage, as time is never on our side, sadly. But we cannot thank you enough. A fascinating look there into supply chain disruptions. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our panel. Thank you.